So, welcome to Wellbeing Wednesdays with Harbinder Narula on BW Wellbeing World. On this International Day of Yoga, we are honored to be joined by someone who has redefined what movement and healing can mean in today's world. Camelia Oberoi is not just a yoga teacher, she's a holistic movement specialist who weaves together the wisdom of yoga, the discipline of Pilates, the fluidity of dance, and the depth of craniosacral therapy into an experience that nurtures both body and spirit. In a time when wellness is often reduced to trends, Camellia brings us back to the essence with breadth, with intention, and graceful strength. Today, we dive into her journey, her philosophy, and how movement done mindfully can transform our lives. So, welcome, Camellia, to BW Wellbeing World.
Thanks, Harbinder.
Camellia, your approach to yoga is beautifully layered with influences of Pilates, dance, craniosacral therapy. What inspired you to create this unique integrative practice around yoga?
I think it was not planned, obviously. It came from me weaving through one discipline to another. So I used to dance when I was really young. I started with Shamak Davar. And then my path took on various connotations. I moved on to doing an MBA. And then I went on to graphic design. I was a graphic designer. And then I started my fitness journey. I used to be very active. I love playing, I love movements. I started going to the gym at that time because that was trendy, but I realized that was not something I really enjoyed. And then I had my kids, and I think it was that time that I actually developed my love for yoga. So I was pregnant with my first child, and I was quite determined to have a child at home. And so I decided that I really needed to be fit, and I started going for Rashmi Palkhiwala's prenatal yoga classes. That was my first introduction to yoga. And it was very gentle, soft yoga, but it enabled me to give birth in a hospital, in an operation theater with no lights, squatting, and the doctor just standing far away. And I almost gave birth myself in candlelight with music, only because my body was really prepared. And I think I realized that giving birth was something really natural if you looked after your body, and your complete well-being. And I think that's what got me hooked, the realization that certain things in life just come easy if you're fit, mentally and physically. And then once I had that child, I got into yoga, and Jangir Palkhiwala is who I credit as my guru. I started yoga with him, and he did a mix of hatha with a lot of Iyengar influences because he had studied under BKS Iyengar. So that was quite nice. Then again, I lost touch somewhere with it. Then I got back and started practicing with his students. In the meantime, I discovered Pilates, and I love that too because Pilates also is mindful movement. It's moving with your breath, a little different from yoga, but I found both of them marry really well. While doing these things, I discovered craniosacral therapy that had to deal with the nervous system. And it's a holistic body work which works with kind of resetting and bringing a nervous system down into a parasympathetic mode. And I realized that's exactly what our yoga practice does too. So as I started developing my own practice, suddenly all these dots started to connect. My dance, which brought fluidity into my movements. So on the days when I felt like I really needed to move to, calm my energies down, I would use a fluid form of yoga. On the days when I felt I just needed to stay grounded and breathe, I would use the Iyengar or the Hatha form of yoga. On the days when I felt I needed core strength, I would do my Pilates. So it kind of just, I don't know, I didn't plan it. It just moved from one to the other. So that's where my practice is. And of course, as we get older, so I'm 51, I realized that what is more important is mobility, the ability to move efficiently with agility, with fluidity, having to keep up with my kids. We go on several holidays together. As you can see, we're in Ladakh right now, or, to the jungles, to the forest. So, yeah, keeping my body as fit as I can, through all my practices.
And Camelia, how did you turn your practice into a profession. Can you share a little bit of a journey around that and how fulfilling has this profession been for you?
So this was the funny thing. I never planned to be a teacher. I never thought I could. And I live in a big, one of these big complexes, gated communities. And whenever I'd go down for a walk, and somebody'd say, "How are you so fit at this age?" And I was like, "Really?" And they'd say, "Yeah." Like, "What do you do? What do you do?" I said, "Well, I practice." At that time, I wasn't a teacher. I said, I do Pilates and I do yoga." They said, "Oh, can you teach us?" And I said, "Well, I'm not qualified to be a teacher." And I had been practicing yoga for many years then. And they said, "No, no, but why don't you just teach us? At least teach us Pilates, because at that time it was all about the look, oh, you got such a flat stomach and this and that." And I was like, let me think about it. And suddenly I see this advert on Pilates training. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a calling. So I went and I did the training and I came back and I started teaching Pilates just in my building, and, my audience grew in the building. Everybody wanted to come. Very basic mat Pilates. I love working with just my body. And then they said, and then they saw me practicing yoga and they said, "Why don't you teach us yoga? You look so good at it." And I said, "But I'm not qualified to teach." And they said, "No, no, no." And then the next weekend, I see like this thing, an advert or I don't know what. Somebody sent me a forward about a yoga teacher training in Bombay. And I didn't have time to go to Rishikesh. I had two kids I had to look after. I was like, wow, this is ideal. So I went and I did my training there. And then I don't know, I just started teaching in my building, word spread. I started teaching, the other buildings. And then the pandemic struck and I started teaching online. That's when it really went off, when people started joining me from all over. And now after the pandemic, I only do online actually. And then I do a few physical workshops. So yeah, that was my journey. Unplanned, just went with the, flow. So yes,
When you were giving your introduction, Camelia, you were talking about yoga and various modalities that you practice. And
right.
made it sound as if, this was more of an healing experience, especially when you were talking about how you gave birth to your child. And so, how would you define movement as healing? Because, what I understand is that uh, there are two phases in life where movement really matters. One is when you're a child, because it helps you grow well. And second is it helps you age well in your later part of your life.
Right.
Where if your body is moving, if your four limbs are moving, you feel more comfortable and in control of yourself. So, how
Right.
would you define movement as healing? And what role does breath and body awareness play in the process of this?
Wow. Okay. How do I put this into words? For me, the ability to express what I'm feeling comes out through movement. And all through my life, I've done various practices, all based on movement, because for me, that becomes my meditation. And for me, what is meditation? It is just being completely present. That is my definition. Okay. I don't know about everybody else's or what is the right definition. It's being completely in the now, not thinking of the past, not thinking of the future, just in the present moment. That can happen having a cup of tea, you know, that can happen as Osho. I'm also an Osho disciple. So, as he described, that can happen while you're sweeping the floor, that could become a meditative practice. Nothing stills me more than movement. When I move, I become still. Still, my mind is still, inside my body is still. And it's almost like, so I've done whirling too with a friend of mine who's a whirler. She's amazing. Her name is Zia Nath. Anyway, and I did a bit of whirling and I realized when they say that it's like the eye of the tornado. It's completely still while everything around you is moving. And that's what heals me, that stillness, which allows my nervous system to come to a rest and to discharge all the stress that it holds. So for me, that is where the healing comes from my movement. And of course, my craniosacral therapy helps because when I'm giving sessions to my clients, I have to be completely as still as I can be, almost in a kind of a meditative state. So imagine sitting there 45 minutes with a client and you have so many clients. You're just sitting in that state all the time. what could be better. I think my profession is amazing because it heals me and it, makes me healthier and healthier. So yeah.
Tell me one thing, when I was listening to you right now, it reminded me of the time when I started to go for yoga for diabetes. And as a part of practice, the whole session, there used to be once in a week when the trainer would help us do yoga nidra. And there was this one
Yeah,
point in time where I almost had an out of body experience where I could just see myself lying down there and
right.
watch myself still, right?
Yeah.
But I've never been able to do that ever again. How does this happen? And is it a reality or is it just a kind of a hallucination for me and I feel that happened to me?
No, I think it's like when you become the observer, right? And it can happen. Yoga nidra is it's that moment where you reach that fine line when you're sleeping but awake. And at that thin line, suddenly you become an observer of yourself. And that is actually, I don't know, nirvana maybe. And maybe we catch glimpses of this, in our life at some point, just a brief second before we again, go back to being human. But yeah, that is it happens often in yoga nidra. It's lovely to be led by somebody, and many times I kind of hear somebody else's yoga nidra, and it takes me to that space where you actually can see yourself, and observe and actually observe your mind. A lot of times we can, if you just sit and see, that's like the same thing you're saying. You can actually watch your mind go to a thought, you know and
Mhm.
not engage and watch it come back, and catch it. And it's interesting because the space between you realizing that you're suddenly not in the present moment, right, and becoming aware of that, it becomes narrower and narrower and narrower as you deepen your practice, till you can almost catch your mind about to run away, and be still. So yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing because it took me about 20 to 30 minutes after that to just get into control because I
Yeah.
had to drive back home. And I remember I was sitting in the car for 20 minutes and I was
Yeah,
unable to start. And it took me 20 minutes to get back
to
to.
ground yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Camilla,
But actually, just to tell you, the person who was leading the practice should actually be able to bring you back to yourself too, to find the grounding in your, because when you have that experience, you need to come back into your physical body. You need to embody yourself completely. Otherwise, like you said, it can be quite uh, overwhelming experience.
this, this. I don't know. I mean, maybe my instructor didn't even realize that I had gone into that kind of a zone. Uh,
Yeah.
Camilla, coming from a background in ballet and modern jazz, how has your early training in dance influenced your teaching style in yoga today?
I think what dance did, and especially performing on stage with Shamak's group that we did, I think it allowed me to express myself. And when I was that age, I didn't really have an easy time at home, you know. And dance was my freedom. It was the moment where I could just be me and allow everything that was um, held inside to just flow out of me. So it was like releasing everything that I was feeling. And it didn't necessarily have to be sadness or anxiety. It could be happiness. It could be joy. It just brought me to a space of being neutral, you know. And I think, yeah, that's what my dance did for me. And so when I feel that need to express myself is when I add it to my practice. I feel that there's something my body is holding which it needs to release or express, and it comes out through my movement. That's when my fluidity takes over.
And tell me one thing. I mean, you've been trained in dance, so you could
Right.
understand. You made it sound as if it was a liberating experience for you, dancing and being able to express yourself. And the feeling of it being able to express whether other people understand, watch,
Yeah.
understand what you are, or interpreting what you are wanting to express. But people who are not trained in these forms, and
Right.
when you're teaching them, how can yoga create a liberating experience for them in their practice? You've been exposed to a lot of different forms, but
Right.
your students may not have been.
So I bring that to them. That's what I bring to them many times, and I'm sure the purists are going to kill me on this. Is we do yoga to music. Many times I tell them, take out the rubber bands from your hair. You know, if somebody's tied it out, and we do a lot of so say your cat and cow, right? And we do it like really dynamically. And I'll play some African music, and the rhythm takes over, and your body at a certain point, I always tell them, drop your mind and let your body take over the movement. And it's incredible. People just start moving, and it's not that I don't think there's a single person who, I mean, many of them laugh and say, oh, we don't have the same rhythm as you have. And it's never about anybody else's rhythm. It's about yours. It's never about looking good. You know, that is what freedom of movement is. It's never about a certain style or a certain look. It's just like if you want to, just shake off whatever it is, then just do that. If it comes out as graceful or not to somebody else is not the idea. So just giving them the space to be able to express themselves without judgment gets them flowing. I mean, it just takes over. So it's never about a look of how it should look. It's about how it should feel in me. And when you describe that to them, they get it.
And Camilla, you were talking about, I heard you mention Hatha Yoga and a younger style. What
Yeah,
are different? Can you explain these different forms of yoga that are there? Because
yeah,
for somebody who was not informed or enlightened on this, for us, yoga
right.
is only one kind of thing. But what's the
Yeah.
difference between these different forms?
So for me, they all are the same except for when to use them. Okay. So I may not describe it accurately. I'm going to do the best that I can. So I actually trained to become a teacher in Ashtanga Yoga, which is a certain set. So the Surya Namaskar of the Ashtanga Yoga is a little different from your classic Hatha Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga has a primary series, so it's a set sequence of poses that you would do. And in a strict Ashtanga practice, you would move on to the next pose till you've perfected the pose before. So you have a standing series, a sitting series, and then you'd have the closing sequence. And then if you've done the whole primary series, then you have a secondary series, right? So that's Ashtanga. It's a very physically demanding practice. Hatha yoga is more gentle. It's more with the breath. It's the few poses that everybody knows and does. Again, a certain sequence of poses, but it's not as strict as Ashtanga is. It's with your breath. Iyengar yoga came about with the use of props. BKS Iyengar started to say yoga should be for everybody, even for people with serious illnesses or serious physical disabilities, and that's where he brought in the blocks and the belts and the yoga wheel and all the different things to help people who are not so flexible or unable to do it because of illness or sickness could also get into the practice of yoga. Vinyasa is a flow. You just keep using your breath and dynamically move with each asana, flows one into the other. What I'd like to do is I never actually plan my class. So, and this is where my craniosacral therapy practice also comes in. In craniosacral therapy, you start to tune into other people's nervous systems and you can see how they're doing. So I start my class and, just by them, the way they get onto the mat, and I notice how they move and how they're moving. And after the initial 2, 3 minutes, I know exactly what kind of practice I need to do with them. If it has to be a dynamic practice, whether it has to be a slow hatha practice, just using your breath, whether we need to do an Iyengar very strict alignment practice because that's what they need that day. So I kind of work my class around how they're feeling that day rather than predetermine what I'm going to do with them. And of course, many times I do something and then I realize it's not really, and I quickly switch and move on to the other. So it's all about working with how my students are feeling that day.
And Camille, you are known for the idea of relaxed effort in movement. I've done my research. Uh,
I'm not known for it. This is what I think is the best way to practice.
Got it. And it's also important that youngsters, the next generation, values the tradition that we have had, the science behind it. Now, while we talk about not being judgmental about how it is being practiced, and there's a need to modernize because the next generation is looking at evidence-based practices. How
Right.
do we ensure that the science and the tradition behind yoga is not lost?
Okay, so that being said, my kids really don't do much yoga. Okay. And I'm not very strict and regimental about these things. I think it's about discovering it yourself. I can talk about it, while I'm in class to my students, or I can talk to my kids about some of the benefits. But I think it's a discovery. I remember when I was 28, somebody told me, you should do yoga. You should. It's so good. It's so good. And I was like, nah, I'm not interested. You know. And then I found it at the right time, and I really dived deep into it. So I think, obviously people are now much more aware of it because of social media, because of Instagram. Now actually my daughter comes and says, I really want to do yoga with you. Let's try and work out a time. So I give them the space. I keep telling them you should, but I give them the space. Don't force it, because I feel it comes to somebody at the right time. You can keep telling somebody yoga is amazing for you. A lot of people actually do yoga not realizing the mental benefits of it, and that's actually the main practice. But you can't force that. They have to start feeling it themselves. You can keep telling somebody, aren't you feeling still? And I can see people doing yoga and I know their minds are everywhere. But I do know there will come a point when it switches on its own. And there is a self realization that comes in. So I'm more about letting people discover it at their own time, at their own pace. I mean, I'd probably drop in a line here or there as a hint, lines that I've learned from my yoga teacher. And I remember this very interesting thing, and we'd be in a pose and he says, forget the pose, I just want you to notice how you're feeling when you're in the pose. If you're not getting it right, are you feeling bad about yourself? Is your mind comparing you, with the next person? If you're doing it really well, is your ego coming up and saying, wow, this pose is so great? And he says, then you've lost the essence of yoga right there and then in both the scenarios, you know but just being where you are at that point and being able to breathe with ease, just being able to just stay there with ease is actually the true essence of your practice. So I kind of remember these things and maybe give hints and hope they pick it up, and like I suddenly realized. And yeah, did that answer your question?
It did. It did. It brings me to my next question, actually, Camelia, because, uh, you know, have you observed or in your experience, what has been the most profound shifts, physical or emotional, that you've seen in students who adopt a mindful movement practice?
I think it's being able to accept where they are in their practice. uh, it's a really funny thing, actually. If I say, so I'll say, okay, we're doing this asana and feel free to use your blocks. 9 times out of 10, when you first start practicing, nobody will use their blocks because everybody, they're really struggling, really struggling. And I'll pick up my block and I'll use it. And then I'll just say, it's think about it. You don't need to struggle. You can use the block and maybe breathe your way into it and and when I see that shift, when I say this now and I say, feel free to use your walk, and that ego is totally out, of the practice. And they, even though they're advanced practitioners, they'll pick up their block, they'll align themselves, maybe slowly let go of the block. I think that's the biggest shift, being able to say, okay, I'm here right now. Maybe today I need that block, just that basic, and also awareness of their body. I really think that's the most mindful thing, that they know exactly where their hand is, they know exactly where their foot is without looking, at their hand or foot. And I think that's why I enjoy teaching online. A lot of people keep saying, how can you teach yoga online? How is that? You need to correct. And I think the best thing that my students have learned, because they've been working online with me for so long, is they correct themselves. I can just talk them through it and tell them how they need to be positioned and how they need to feel in that position, maybe. And maybe they feel this, maybe they feel that. And it's amazing to see how they start correcting themselves. And I think that also helps us self practice. When you can realize that you're confident enough to get into a pose without any teacher physically coming and correcting you,
Mhm.
I think they start even doing their self practice, which is amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. And Camilla, what makes craniosacral therapy a natural complement to yoga? Can you share a moment where combining the two transformed somebody's healing journey? Because somewhere where you've seen somebody transforming themselves or heal themselves, combining these two therapies.
Actually, it's more me than anybody else. I use my craniosacral abilities to help in my yoga practice. And I use the stillness that I get from my yoga practice to make me a better craniosacral practitioner. But I don't know about somebody doing yoga and doing craniosacral, because in craniosacral, it's more about me gently guiding them into a place of stillness with my hands. And a yoga practice is a more physical way of them getting there. So I don't know if it's more about me and how I integrate the two to just become a better yoga teacher and a better craniosacral. I mean, one and the other just complement each other.
Awesome. And you've been into Pilates, you do yoga, and your yoga is influenced by Pilates and other things that you've done. And they both focus on strength and posture. But how do you differentiate for someone who does not understand the combination of these two? How do you differentiate and then integrate the two in your sessions?
Yoga actually makes your body do really, it stretches it beyond its actual limit. So, and Pilates is more what actually physiotherapists use. So it's a safer way of gaining strength in your body, especially your core strength, right? But it's more controlled. Yoga, kind of all the contortions that you do in yoga. So you'll never really extend your spine in Pilates like you would do in yoga. It's a really more controlled in Pilates. So I use Pilates to help people build strength, especially core strength. And that actually really helps your yoga practice, because when you have that basic strength in your body, then when you do all these extreme, because you'll hear now people uh, people get injured really fast in yoga right now. And the reason being, of course, is modern living and conveniences. Most people that I know, and a lot of times I start my class by saying, how many of you can sit down on the floor and get up without using your hands? And it is shocking. It is shocking. Like the percentage of people, it's almost like 0.05% can actually do that. So modern living, comfort, constantly sitting on chairs, sofas, not sitting down on the floor, has made our bodies like most unfit, like just basic activities, right? A resting squat, when you just squat down, like we see in the villages, right? 80, 90-year-old women squatting, having their chai completely. Today, you ask even my 16-year-old to squat, and they really can't because they're just not used to it, right? So, you need to strengthen your body and then do those extreme postures in yoga. I think, especially for modern day living. And that's how I combine the two.
Okay, now you were talking about you're now doing sessions online. I
Right,
want there's this big trend of Instagram and
right.
becoming a influencer today, you know. And I have a big problem with that because I keep doing these conversations with people and I realize that there needs to be a difference between somebody who claims to be an expert by way of qualification and experience versus someone else who is just an enthusiast but claims to be an expert, right?
Mhm.
What do you think needs to happen to bring that awareness with people who are following their influencers online? Because For example, I'm taking this cue from what you just said about your when you were introducing yourself, that you went, people asked you to teach them, but you said, listen, I'm not trained. And then you went and got yourself trained as a teacher. Because practicing yoga versus being trained to teach someone else is a different ball game. What do you think needs to happen today so that we are able to differentiate between someone who's qualified to give you tips versus someone who's enthusiastic about it with the right intention, but is not trained to be able to do that?
You want my honest answer?
Yes, absolute honest answer.
I think the teacher trainings, and I'm not sure of all of them, but I think a lot of them are not enough. Yeah, I don't think you need to really be trained to be a teacher, honestly. I think in yoga, I have seen people who've never done yoga come for a teacher training and walk out after a month claiming to be yoga teachers. And I know people who have practiced for years and can very easily be yoga teachers and have never had a qualification per se to teach yoga. Um, I think being a good teacher, uh, especially for yoga, comes from, or any discipline actually for that matter, comes from really practicing it yourself for a long time, noticing how it changes your body, noticing. I think it only comes through self discovery. And when you can feel that, is when you can actually put it into words, and you're not just spouting something that you've learned in a course. This, you've lived through that experience, and that can't come in a month. It can't come in a month of training. I don't think it can come in 6 months of practicing yoga. I think it's doing it and realizing and moving. I'm still learning today. I still don't think I'm an expert, in the field. I learn even through the most basic pose I learn. So no, I don't think you need to be qualified in the way that we are.
Mhm.
That's my personal opinion. Like I said, I've seen how it works. um, I do think you need a lot of self practice, and you need to be honest, you know, and authentic when you teach. And it doesn't matter if you can't do a pose. There may be a pose you can never do, even if you're a teacher. But if you can do it with a prop and understand, what happens in that pose physically, emotionally, mentally, and are able to project that to your students, I think you can be a really good teacher. You
Uh,
know,
uh, Taking from what you just said, how do we then ensure the minimum standards? Because you just also mentioned that
there's no way you can.
no, no, but what I'm saying is that, you just mentioned that in yoga, there are a lot of injuries that happen because of
Right,
people's lifestyle.
right,
And as a teacher, as a practitioner, it's fine. But as a teacher, you have to take on the responsibility
absolutely.
of the people. What do you think needs to happen to ensure? Because I could, in 2 months of practice, start feeling that, okay, listen, I can go and teach, right? But somebody has
Yeah.
to bring in that minimum standard that, okay, listen, you have done the minimum. You don't need to be a big time expert, but you know your basics. So is there some kind of a certification that you feel is necessary for people to have before they start teaching so that the basic standards are ensured?
So I think this is what I hear, that the Iyengar practice has a really good way of doing it. The Iyengar students become teachers when their master thinks they are ready to become teachers. So they tell their students, okay, now you can teach these students. And that's how they come up. And I think that's a really good way of doing it, because the teacher always knows, how far the student is and what they're capable of. As far as the other modalities, like I said, there is a 1 month teacher training. You can do your 200-hour yoga teacher training, and you've got that certificate, the Yoga Alliance certificate, by the US, whatever, you're safe for the insurances. I don't think in any way. And I think for students, I think they have to just find that connection with a teacher, right? And they have to maybe experience as many teachers as they can. And then I think it just clicks with somebody. But I don't know about I think there was one, when I was searching for a good yoga teacher training, I forget the name. There was a lady in Bandra, I really forget. And she actually called me for an interview, and I was impressed with that. So it wasn't that I just signed up and she took, unfortunately, she didn't have enough people to train, and that fell through. But I do remember she called me for an interview. She spoke to me about why I wanted to become a teacher. So we had a 1 hour conversation. What my practice has been like, who have I been practicing in it, how many hours a day do I practice. Then she said, I'd like you to do 2 classes, my regular classes, and I would like you to see you in that class. And after that, she said, okay, great, you can enroll. So I think it lies with the authenticity of the people leading the trainings. I've been asked by many people, random people, can you please train us to be a teacher? I'm not trained. I can't do it. You know, um, Nobody's going to check my qualifications. I can easily say I'm going to start a teacher training. Who's going to tell me no? But I think that just comes with just being honest, you know. So yeah, I think I really remember that lady. And like I said, I keep forgetting her name. I just can't remember it. But I remember that interview process, and I was so disappointed when she said that, you know, it's not possible because I don't have a crew. Because I knew she was genuine, and I knew I would be a really good teacher if I trained under.
Right.
It would at least be an authentic qualification.
And Camelia, uh, have you ever felt uh, that when you are training your students on yoga and integrating the modern modalities along with it, it is and it does impact their not just physical being but also their mental being, you know,
Yeah.
that you're doing more than just making people feel physically healthy. It's transforming their life. It is transforming their thought process. It is impacting how they live with their families, etc. Have you ever felt that the role of someone who's into a profession like yours is that of a well-being coach to people? I mean, you don't have to be qualified to do that, but the feeling
Yeah.
you get.
No, I wouldn't give that much credit to myself, to be honest. I think the credit goes to them and their body. I mean, many times they'll message me and say, this happened or that happened, privately. And I really think they have to give gratitude to their own body for themselves, firstly, for coming onto the mat, you know, and then something that transformed. How can I be responsible for something that's transformed in their body? It's credit goes to them. I can just give them a certain set of poses, but I think it's yeah. I
So
don't think I
to
can take the
get
credit for that.
acceptance of receiving what they receive from you. That's very beautiful. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Camelia, and the way you did. Camelia, one of the issues that I have had in the past, I've tried to improve myself on this, but I find it quite common outside. And when people say that, listen, I want to do yoga, I want to do some form of exercise, but unfortunately, I don't get time. I have to wake up in the morning, send my child to school, then I have to rush to work. By the time I come back, I'm really tired. मेरे को time ही नहीं मिलता है. Is there something that people can do to make yoga effortless part of their lifestyle so they don't have to take out 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour to do something where they have to, it feels like a big effort for them. And maybe in a way that you have made it a part of your lifestyle. And if you could also, I mean, I'm taking the liberty of asking you if you could demonstrate what is it that people like us could do without having to take out 30 minutes.
So I think the reason I'm like a cat, I just need to stretch all the time. Okay. So if you ask me to sit still like this, I think sometimes, and if my body feels like it hasn't moved, I will do like, just to show you. For example, if I'm sitting, I feel okay, my hips are too tight. I don't know if you can see me, but let me take this further away. Okay. So I'm sitting with my kids having a conversation. I'll cross my legs, I'll stretch down, I'll go over, I'll come back. Easy hip stretch. Okay. I feel my shoulders are too tight. I might get up while having a conversation with my friends. I'll suddenly go, and stretch out my shoulders. I have many reels where I'm making coffee in my kitchen. My leg is on the counter, if this was a counter, and I'm stretching while my coffee is brewing. You could be brushing your teeth and you could do like a forward bend. You know, uh, it's limitless. There is no, you don't actually need to even get onto the mat to do yoga. You could be standing, you could be just finding your balance and doing a tree pose. Uh, you don't really need to take the time out. If you have the time, it'd be great. I remember something, especially when I wanted to start a self practice. I asked my teacher, but I can't do it without you leading me. And she said, it's really simple. Just do two standing poses, two sitting poses, and Shavasana. So if you remember two basic standing poses, which could even be Tadasana, right? Just standing straight. Maybe it could be a tree pose. And then you do two sitting poses, which could be butterfly, say, right? Baddha and maybe a seated forward fold, and then just lie down in Shavasana. So that's what I tell my students a lot of times. I say, why don't you write down three standing poses, three sitting poses, add a twist, add any back bend you want, and a Shavasana, and now go do that tomorrow, Sunday. And they'll write down their own practice and they'll do it. So it doesn't have to be complicated.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I'm one of those people who always comes with excuses. But what has worked for me is that I don't take out time. But and I don't know if it's the correct thing to do or not, but I do something at some point in time. After working for an hour, I'll just get up. I'll do this Tadasana for stretching myself. And
Yeah,
when I'm walking out, I'll just go bend. But there's
right,
no one time when I do all these asanas together. I don't even
right,
see it as an asana now, honestly. I just
right.
I'm just doing something to stretch myself, etc.
Stretch yourself. Yeah.
Camelia, finally, on the World Yoga Day, what message would you have to give to someone who feels disconnected from their body and feeling overwhelmed with life? Uh, and the reason I'm asking you this is because one of the things that is known about yoga, is that it's a unison of physical and mental being, right? How can it help? And I also understand that there's meditation, which is a part of it. While most people think that yoga means doing asanas and breath work, but there is a lot of meditation as a part of yoga. So what would be your message to those who feel disconnected from their body and overwhelmed with their life?
Does it have to be yoga related? I think the
And
first thing that people need to do is get back to nature. The first thing they need to do is maybe come out into the wild. I'm at this lovely property here. I don't know, maybe I can quickly turn it around, and can you see the mountains
you
and
would,
the Indus
wow,
um, River in the front is called Indus River Camp, by the way. So I'm leading a yoga retreat here.
awesome.
And more than yoga, it's about getting these people out into nature. Yeah. And then yoga is just an extra thing that I add on, actually. I think the first thing is connection with the earth, living in tune with nature, living in tune with the circadian rhythm, waking up when it's light, sleeping when it's dark. I think once we find that connection, and then it becomes so easy to do yoga here. You wake up in the morning with first light, you have ample time, but our lives have become so disconnected from the earth, so disconnected from the nature. We live in these, including me, live in these high rise buildings, far away from the earth. We have no idea of sunrise, sunset, and I think just getting back to that, is firstly the most important thing. And then once you're taking these frequent breaks in nature and you feel connected with yourself, then any practice, be it yoga, be it whatever, there is a unison. You can have even unison in a gym when you're working, you
Mm.
know. But when that disconnection happens, no matter what you do, it your mind is going to be elsewhere and your body is going to be else, you know. So I think, yeah, just getting back to nature and then starting the practice. I mean, like I said, there's no way to describe the benefits of yoga. You can keep telling people it's great for your mental health, but I think people always start the practice at a physical level. And that's perfectly fine because that will lead you somewhere. You'll keep working only on the physical level, and slowly you'll realize it touches so much more, and it'll happen without you realizing it.
Mhm.
And then that shift when you realize it is when you get addicted and hooked.
You know, I'm so glad that you turned your laptop and panned it to show us the nature. And so for everyone else who otherwise would have believed that you've got a wallpaper behind you, it's not.
Like a screensaver. I wake up every day in this chalet and I'm looking out at that, and it feels like I have this big giant screen, laptop screen.
Absolutely. That's what it feels to me when I'm looking at your screen right now. But honestly, Camelia, it's such a beautiful conversation, and it is how you have brought out that the concept of stillness, and stillness of not just sitting there and being still, but to have your mind still, is was a very powerful thing that I remember from this conversation. Second is, you know, what you're talking about, connecting with the Mother Earth, connecting with nature. It just makes us feel more real and relatable. So whether it is yoga or in the form as people usually interpret yoga to be with asanas, or whether it is the mindfulness, I think the connect with the body becomes more real and relatable when you are in touch with the nature. I mean, I also remembered when someone told me, after listening to you and what you think about nature, that चप्पल उतार के जमीन पे पैर रखो and you will feel the difference, and so
I'm always walking around barefoot.
so that I just got reminded of that. And finally, what I would say is that, after listening to the conversation with you, uh, I just feel that it is a beautiful way of liberating or having a feeling or an experience of liberation and feeling good that what yoga can do. I mean, when I was talking about how do you create, how do you get away from the overwhelming life around you with so much happening, clutter of thoughts, clutter of information, people, so many people around you. It just is a very liberating experience when you are able to connect your physical being with your mental being. And I think that's what yoga does. And thanks to people like you are bringing it in a modern manner so that it is contextual to our way of living of today. So
Can
thank you.
I just
Yeah,
can I
absolutely.
put one small point? And I think the main lesson that I've learned through yoga has got to be contentment. I'm really content where I am, right? I mean, I'd love to escape into nature all the time, probably live away from Bombay, but it's really taught me to be content, whether it's how much money I have or possessions I have, or also where I am in my practice, you know. And that feeling of contentment, I can't explain. I think that is my biggest thing from yoga,
Since
you
you've
know.
started talking about the last sentence, I think I would like to add, apart from contentment, I think, it is an outcome of acceptance.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
you were talking of that, it's not that I have made a difference to somebody's life. It's a
Yeah,
difference that they have made to their life by accepting whatever I'm offering. Because what you're offering is to everyone. But few people
right.
accept it, few people receive it and use it. And another thing that you brought out very beautifully, Camelia, and I must compliment you for that, is the point of being having a situation or environment of egolessness, where
Yeah,
you're grounded, because you can only offer something when you want to be a giver. You know,
yeah,
it's not an exchange. Exchange, of course, is there, but that's not the purpose of what you're doing and how you are doing it. You know,
right.
that was something which was also that came in my mind. I'm so glad that you kind of triggered this, and so that I could share it with you. Camelia, thank you so much for taking out time. I know you are in a beautiful place. You have a busy time, and with yoga day being there, you're already very occupied. But it means a lot for us to have you take out time for our audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And by the way, every day is yoga day for me, huh? Just saying.
Absolutely.